again. On page 84, we're moving into lesson 17, the key of F major. In F major, we're making a big change here. We're going from sharp keys, which we have been doing previously, to flat keys. F major being the first of the flat keys, series of flat keys. F major has a B flat in the key signature. This B flat is required. Remember the step formula for the major scale: whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. If you start on F and you carry that formula out, it makes sense to put a B flat in there to make that formula work. Keep in mind that we'll be going into flat keys now. We were doing sharp keys before because adding sharps helps that formula to work, but now that we're starting on F, it won't work the same way with sharps, so we use flats. The F major scale, we're going to play up to the high G on the first string, the low F, and then we have an open F. If your B flats, one will be here, first fret, fifth string, third fret, third string will be the B flats. So keep that in mind. There are no second string open notes on this one. That would be a B. So there are no B's in the key of F major. In the middle of page 84, we have an F major scale study. Pay close attention to the fingerings. At the fourth measure, you'll have a second finger, first fret, F. And the reason for that is because I want you to play that with a second finger so that when you play the C that comes right after it, you can play that with the first finger. Alright? So this exercise, also be careful with the intervals here. At the beginning it looks like it's just a regular scale, but actually I skip to the to F-A. So it's a combination of skips and stepwise movement in this. Also, remember with these scale studies, they're not just a bunch of notes. You can phrase these scale studies. They're meant to be phrased in a way that you would play an actual piece of music, rather than just, for example, when you play a scale, you might play it in sort of a mechanical way when you first learn how to play it. But even a scale can be played in a very musical way where you can concentrate on the phrasing, and that is, you might start off maybe louder, you might start off quieter. There are so many different ways to do this. For now, I would like for you to keep your tempo consistent. A lot of times when you get into phrasing, more advanced phrasing, you might use some ritardando, you might use accelerando, where you go faster, slower. For now, we're going to try to keep it to where you're keeping time really well, and then later on manipulating the time a little bit. I think it's important to do that. So here's the F major scale study. In F major, of course, we have the F major chord that we'll need to play. One of the harder chords, standard chords to play, as we talked about earlier in the book. Try making your F by putting the two fingers down that are not barred first, and then putting down the bar that's a two-string bar to work on that F major chord, rather than trying to do it like this. I think you'll have better luck with it here and starting like that. Of course, eventually you want to be able to just put them all down at once. At the bottom of page 84, we're also going to use the movable form of the major scale that we used in the key of E, if you remember. In the E, we played it in 4th position, starting with your 4th finger. If you move that entire scale up to 5th position, you start with your 4th finger on the 8th fret, 5th string, you'll have an F major scale. Now, of course, what these scales are for, when you have these higher positions, they're to allow you to play higher notes on the fingerboard, so that when you play melodies that have these higher notes, you'll be able to come up here. So the low notes, you obviously won't be able to play these low notes that normally the lowest of the notes in the F major scale. But if your melody is mostly up here anyway, you'll need to be in that position. So here's the F major scale again, 5th position. Then we have this chord, this minor chord that we learned earlier. You can play that as well. On page 85, we're getting into a little bit more music theory. Music theory having to do with how music's put together, how the notes work together, and making chords and scales and things like that. If you read with me about chord formation and major scale harmonization, page 85, the same notes in a key that are used for scales are also used for the chords in that key. The simplest chords are called triads. Triads are a combination of 3 different notes. Triads are formed by taking a starting note called the root note and adding notes a 3rd and 5th higher than the root. An F major chord uses F, A, and C. Any chordal combination, block chord, strum chord, or arpeggio, of F, A, C is an F major chord. Doubling more than one of the same letter of the chord may also occur. You can also play this chord with two Fs. You can play it with F, A, C. You can play it with F, A, C, F, which is what our usual F major chord is. The chord up here, F, A, C, F, A. That's a 5-note F chord, but it's still just the combination of F, A, and C. Now, when you take a note other than F, for example, in the key of F, you take G. Let's take the note G. And if we build a chord on top of a G, you'll have the notes G, B flat, because you would skip A, G, skip A, B flat, skip C, then you have D. So then you have G, B flat, and D. Now, G, B flat, and D make up a chord that is a minor chord, G minor chord. I'm not going to go into great detail about what makes a major chord and what makes a minor chord. I'll do that at a later date and probably in a different book. However, if you look at page 85 here, to harmonize a scale, building chords first start with the notes of the scale. Then add a 3rd and a 5th to every note of the scale. So keep in mind that when we're talking about a 3rd and a 5th, we're talking about a note that is 3 away. So for example, if it's F, F, G, A is a 3rd away. If it's a G chord, or starting G is 1, G, A, B flat in the key of F, that's a 3rd away. B flat, C would be the 4th, D would be a 5th away. So that's root, 3rd, and 5th. All right, that's how your chords are constructed. All right. the intervals or distances between the root, third, and fifth of a chord determine whether that chord will be major, minor, diminished, or augmented. To understand this more fully, concentrated study of music theory is essential. That requires a different book. The chord symbol for major is the letter only, F, C, etc. Minor uses the little m after the letter, A minor, D minor, etc. And diminished chords usually use the abbreviation DIM. Augmented, AUG, triads are not formed from major scales. They are formed in minor keys, minor scales. So if you look at the chords that I've formed here on page 85, you look at the F, F, A, C. A G minor chord would have to be up here, G, B flat, D. You'd have to play it right here because you can't play a B flat in an open G because B flat's there, open G's here, so your G has to be played here, B flat, D. Your A minor can be played in first position, A, C, E. Alright, your B flat can be played like this. I'm just showing you how these are formed. Alright, D minor, we have to move up the fingerboard here. D, F, A. E diminished, we'll have an E, G, and a B flat. And then we have an F, A, C. So we went from the low F, A, C to this F, A, C up here. So this just illustrates how chords are actually formed in the stacks that they're in right there. The voicing or arrangement of the notes in the triad along with doublings may be varied. Shown below are some common voicings of chords in F major. The first one is this chord as we saw here, the F. Here's the G minor. You bar all the strings on the 3rd fret. You're going to play the bass note here. These notes are barred. Alright, here's the A minor again. Now here's a B flat chord. You're going to bar 5 strings here, 3rd finger and 4th finger here. There's no middle finger, no 2nd finger. Then you have a C chord. Alright, then you have a D minor chord. Then you have this diminished chord, E diminished. Alright, so these are all the chords F, G minor, A minor, B flat, C, D minor, E diminished, and F. Alright? Now, if you'll notice this pattern, look back in the middle of page 85, this pattern of major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, and then major again. That is the same pattern of chords in their positions in the key that will work in any major key. So for example, if you were in the key of C, let's take C, has no sharps or flats. C, the first chord in C would be a C chord. The second chord would be a D minor. The third chord would be an E minor. The fourth chord would be an F. The fifth chord would be a G. The sixth chord would be an A minor. And the seventh chord would be a B diminished. So that is all transferred over into whatever key that you're in. You just have to keep in mind all the accidentals that are there in that particular key. We use C in that particular example because there were no sharps or flats. But in F, your 4 chord is going to be B flat. So keep that in mind with this major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished pattern for the 7 main chords of a key. You'll actually do really well with songwriting, composing if you have that memorized. At the bottom of page 85, when a bass note of a chord is other than the root note, the chord is called an inversion. Chord symbols with inversions will show the name of the chord first and then the alternate bass note. So for example, if you look at the first chord there, the bass note of this F chord. It's an F chord, all right? In this case, we're not going to play the A here that we normally would play. The A is actually going to be in the bass. So this is what's called a first inversion F chord. The bass is here. Still an F chord. It's still an F chord, but it has the bass in, it has an A in the bass, all right? The next one we have a G minor chord, okay? G, B flat, and D are the three notes in a G minor chord. Now we have the B flat in the bass. All right, this one is an A, C, E. A minor is A, C, and E. Now we have C in the bass, C, A, and E. All right, and then a B flat chord with the first inversion, D in the bass. Okay, a C chord with an E in the bass. They have a very different sound, don't they, than the normal chord. It's one way to really expand the sound of a chord. Now we have second inversion, some second inversion chords. D minor over A. The A is the fifth away, so it's the first inversion would have the third in the bass. The second inversion has the fifth in the bass. So you have A in the bass. All right. The E diminished, we're going to have the B flat in the bass. All right. And then we have this F over C. So these are what are called inversions. And I wrote these in a common way that you'll see in songbooks, and you'll see them in a lot, where you have the two letters, and sometimes people are confused. So if you see the F/A, don't play an A chord, play an F chord, but you'll have an A in the bass. So that's a little bit about inversions. Continuing lesson 17 on page 86, we have a solo called Floating Dream. This one I introduced the concept of Sostenuto, which means sustained in Italian. It means to hold these notes out. You're playing arpeggios, make sure you hold the chords out, the notes of the chord, as long as you can before you have to shift to another chord. There are several instances in this piece where you have a fretted note and an open string in between. For example, at the very beginning. So make sure you play on the very tips of your fingers once again. This chord shape also, it looks a lot like the bar chord F, but it's not a bar chord. This first finger is not barred, so it holds the same notes as the bar chord, but only on the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth strings. There are a lot of string crossing sections here where you need to change the arpeggio. Look at the second line. Then it goes to the next set of strings. So P, I, A, M is the main pattern, but it's not always on the same string, so make sure that you're shifting your pattern to whatever group of strings that you need to play on. Also, the phrasing, make sure that you observe the dynamics. There's a sort of an arc effect this whole piece where it starts out quiet and gradually gets louder right in the middle, and then it sort of does this again with a sort of a small arc, sort of like in waves. So experiment with that. With tone color also. You can play up, when you play up here, remember, you get a much more mellow kind of sound, almost like a harp. In fact, the more up here you play, the more harp-like you get. And then back here, brighter sound. So what you're doing is sort of orchestrating your guitar. You're using the guitar sort of like as a mini orchestra where you change the tone color depending on what kind of effect that you want to get. There are also several shifts in this one where you have to go from a first position chord to a bar chord, the biggest shift at the fourth line. position there. Make sure that you do that smoothly. Also, you have a third, let's see, the fifth line down, measure 15. Then you have this fermata. You take your time. All right, don't go too fast. On page 87, we have more slur practice. In order to articulate musical phrases in various ways, learning and practicing slurs in all finger combinations is crucial for developing strong left-hand technique. We will use the fifth position, F major scale, to practice some of these combinations in a melodic setting. We're going to be in fifth position here. We're going to be playing on the first and second strings, mostly, also some third and fourth string notes. Slurs, of course, happen on all strings. When you do the slur practice, you can practice on all of them if you want, any of these combinations. So this is just all on one page, and still sort of only touching the surface of all the practice that you can do with slurs. But the basics are that your first finger will be over the 5th fret, and we have hammer-ons here and a pull-off here. So at the beginning it's all right. Okay, so remember, when you're doing your hammer-ons, the finger needs to come straight down on that fret where you're hammering. Play strong enough on the right hand to make sure that that string vibrates well enough. Keep your left hand thumb down. Try not to play like this because you are putting your 4th finger at a disadvantage. So by the time you have to play your 4th finger note, it's difficult to get up there when your thumb is up like this. So try to make sure that you do that. So at the very beginning, we have this hammer on and then a pull off. So you leave the 2nd finger down right? Remember, when you do any kind of pull-off, which is a descending slur, you need to have both fingers down that are used in that descending slur. Don't start off with the higher one and then try to do this. It won't work. So the pull-off, you're picking the note and then flicking it with the left hand finger. So you pick the note and you flick it. Alright? When you're playing the strings that are the inner strings, when you're on the first string, it's not a problem. You're pulling down like this and there's no other string. A lot of times when you're playing a second string or third string or fourth string, you can kind of graze the top of the adjacent string after you do the pull-off. Some people differentiate between a sort of a free stroke slur or a rest stroke slur. Rest stroke meaning that after you flick the note, your finger's resting on the next string. I frankly don't make a big differentiation between the two, so I figure you don't really want to hit this other string, so I try to avoid it. I might graze the top of it, but it doesn't make a noise. Slur practice is something that will really strengthen your left hand. It also strengthens the muscles right here that are used in fretting and playing the left hand. You don't need to practice slurs for hours a day. Just a few minutes a day will do you a lot of good for string practice. It's sort of like doing sit-ups, I guess. You don't need to be doing them until you can't stand up. Don't do these slurs if your fingers start really hurting or anything like that. Just get it to the point where your fingers start to kind of give out a little bit, and then the next time you play them, you should be able to play them faster and stronger. So just do these every day. I try to make these sort of a musical type of exercise so that if you could memorize the entire thing, you pretty much would have your dosage of slurs every day on that. So practice them every day. Continuing lesson 17, page 88, we have a duet that I wrote called Romantic Prelude. And this one, the guitar one part will mostly be in fifth position, so you shouldn't have to move around too much with that. There are some slurs. Take a look at measure 10. You have a hammer on, and then a pull off here. All right, so make sure that you have your hand in good position here in fifth position. Your fourth finger needs to be hovering over the 8th fret. Don't have your fourth finger back like this. It's not in position. It's too far away from the fingerboard. So make sure that the fourth finger is over the 8th fret. At measure 24, you also have a slur here. Okay. At measure 30, you have a half bar here. So make sure that you do that. You have a C sharp here at measure 33. Okay. And then it changes to natural at 37. All right, so pay close attention to that. You have a lot of pickup notes here, measure 40. So make sure that you play that on the last 2 8th notes of the measure. So it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2. You're holding an A here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2. Okay. Remember, this is 6/8 time. We haven't talked much about vibrato, but on the guitar one part, if you haven't tried it already in some of the other pieces, try doing vibrato. The vibrato that you're trying to do is sort of a rocking back and forth. You need to hold your finger down securely, rock it back and forth here along the line of the string. This is different than what you might see in a rock player doing something like that, where they're pulling the string, pulling down on it, or pushing up on it. This type of vibrato is sort of more like what a violin or a bowed instrument would do. When you're down here, it doesn't do much. So that's when you need to probably play more of the sort of rock or blues style vibrato. But up here, seems to work better like this. If I do the same thing down here, doesn't do a whole lot, does a little bit. You don't get the same effect that you get up here. So experiment with vibrato a little bit. Also, vibrato should sort of be in time with the music. I think that it should be sort of a subdivision of the beat. Sometimes people have a different kind of vibrato. You hear people singing, they have different vibratos. Some people have a really wide vibrato, and some people have a very kind of quivering vibrato. So I personally like a little more subtle and maybe a quicker vibrato. It all depends really on the tempo of the music. So experiment with that. That should be about it for the guitar 1 part. The guitar 2 part is mostly all arpeggios, mixed in with some block chords. So there's a combination of arpeggios and block chords, lots of bars. You have to move around a lot with the bars, so make sure you pay close attention to the bar symbols, the Roman numerals. When you're working these out with your duet partner, discuss how you want to play different sections of the music, how you want to phrase them so that you can be coordinated together. A lot of these duets, when I do them multi-tracked, I can't really interact with myself playing these pieces in a very spontaneous way, so I play these duets in sort of a plain manner with a very, very solid tempo, because I don't really want you just to imitate my interpretation all the time. I mean, it's very important to imitate when you're learning, very important. But with these duets, I think there's a lot of flexibility as far as how you and your duet partner could play these. So I want to give you the freedom to do that. I do have dynamic markings in here that are suggested. You don't have to do those, but I would say at the very least do some of the dynamic markings that I put in here. They're just guidelines, really. So I hope you enjoy this and find some use for it.